And here we are with the third and final part of our mystery end grain cutting board build. Do you remember when we started this, we had no idea what it was going to look like. We just started throwing things together and we were going to let the wood speak to us. And we're down to our final stretch of the final process. So here we are the following day, taking clamps off, breaking it free. We got to clean the glue off the top because we're going to have to run this through the planer to make sure all our pieces are nice and level and flat with each other. Sometimes I'll use a scraper. Sometimes a chisel works great as well. So now you notice with the scrapers, sometimes you'll tear the wood out as you scrape it. So at least you have a little more control with the scrapers or with the chisel. So I like to use the chisel to get the problem pieces off and then use the scraper. So here we go, running it through the planer, trying to get everything nice and flat straight across so we can flip it over and get another nice flat edge, because now we're gonna have to essentially dissect this. What we're going to do is we're going to cut across the grain, and that's how we're going to establish our end grain pattern. Now we're taking it here through the jointer just so we have a nice smooth edge for reference when we have our crosscut sled out with our table saw. First thing we want to do is set the zero to our tabletop, and then we want to make sure our blade is 90 degrees. So after it's set, put it on the blade. 89.9, 90, 89.9, close enough. Sadly, this is a Hercules saw, so I doubt I will ever get exactly 90 degrees. So I'm doing a 1.25 inch cuts on this. I'm trying to get 2 boards out of this. So we're just going to keep cutting across the grain just like we are right now. And we'll repeat this process until the entire board has been cut up. Now that we have the board dissected, now is when the magic starts to happen. When we start rotating our pieces to figure out some kind of coordination tool. I thought doing triangles here was a good start. So here I am trying to get everything lined up, making sure my lines are nice and straight. It's really difficult, especially once you get these into the clamps. You may still have some slight movement. You'll never get these 100% lined up unless you do panels and then piece the board together that way. Since we're dealing with angles, it's kind of hard to do this project in panels. Now that we have both boards set up the way we want them, everything looks good. We're going to want to number each piece, so when we lay the board back out after sanding and getting the rough edges off from the saw, we know exactly how to put this back together. I ended up with actually 2 boards out of this and enough pieces left over to also make a lazy Susan. But I'm only concentrating on the cutting boards right now. So now that we have these numbered, we're gonna hand sand our edges because of a little chip out here and there, and we don't really need a power tool to take off the little bit that's there. Now, why these 2 boards sat side by side like they did, I kind of picked up on, if I slap these together, there's a center diamond, and it got me thinking, why don't we do this? So next phase is, after we put those through a glue up, we have to run it through the sander again. But with the way it's lined up and these being cross pieces, we have our flattening jig. This is a 100% flat piece already, and then you find your high and low spots and you shim it so it sits nice and level. Use your chalk to mark your lines so you can see where you're hitting with the sander and where you're not. You're probably going to end up doing this several times because eventually with handling this, you do end up erasing the lines on your own. So you will have to put lines back on partially way through it again. Now it's time for the drum sander to work its magic. Starting this off sometimes can be a little tricky. You gotta constantly keep lowering and lowering because there will be high spots. So you can't just put the board in, adjust it down until you make contact and think, oh, this is good, when essentially it's not, because your higher boards, when you're feeding this through, can catch on the other end. So here we are after we finished sanding. Everything is level, and these don't quite line up quite right, so we're going to try to trim that center off on both sides using the jointer and see if we can get it flush. And we do. And I really like this design, and I thought, hey, what about if we split each side down to maple and then glue up the two halves? And that's exactly what I did here. Now the photos of the glue is just how I'll tape my bottles together like that and let the lesser bottle dump into the new bottle, so we're utilizing as much glue as possible and saving as much as we can. So now that we have our two halves, you see them coming through the drum sander. You can see the diamond pattern in the center, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. Honestly, I'm actually pretty proud of myself too, because and here's our board. I'm pretty proud of it. So now we're going to take the router and we're going to give it a chamfer on all four sides, and then we're going to flip the board over and do it again. I've been doing more chamfering to these boards instead of a 1/8 inch roundover, and I kind of have to say I do like the chamfer look a lot better than the roundover. The chamfer bit does leave some fibers sitting behind, and all we're going to do is take our flat edge sander and sand it by hand, and then go up through the grits with our orbital sander. I will save you guys the boredom of just watching me sand these boards all the way up through. Make sure you don't forget about your chamfer edges too. It's nice to have a nice flat reference to sand with instead of using your fingers and hand. Your fingers and hand can curl this over very easily and make it unproportional. When sanding this, try to use full strokes along the entire board versus working in one spot like I am here. If you do work in one spot, just pay attention to how long you stayed sanding in that spot to try to keep this entire edge unison and looking as parallel as possible. You should also do your best to try to sand out any burn marks left behind by the router. Just push it until you think the board is going to start distorting. If you do, it's a judgment call left all on your own. I will work at it for a little bit, and if I can't get it with a little bit, I tend to move on just because I'm so concerned about ruining that corner, especially. It could start to look rounded over or wider on that end versus the other side, so I try to leave it. Okay, here we are, sanded all the way through up to 180 grit. They look great, everything's nice and smooth. Now we have to do the grain pop. What I mean by that is taking a spray bottle with water or a rag with water on it and getting the board wet. What this essentially does is lift the fibers up off of the board so they're standing upright again, and we can get a better sand on it. This also stops the mineral oil from having the same effect once the board gets wet. So sand it to the grit to the finished grit that you want it to. Spray it down. It doesn't have to be soaking wet, just nice and damp. And then let them sit and dry, and then sand with your final grit again. And here we are. The boards are done. We're doing our oiling. My wife makes a great camera person. I don't know how she deals with me when I bring home new boards, because every board gets oiling, and she does the video for every one of them. But here you go. This is what your board is essentially going to look like when it's done. Flip it over. Apply the mineral oil to this side. I use Howard products. I've been using them ever since I started cutting boards 4 years ago, and I haven't had any issues with their cutting cutting board oil or their conditioner oil. And yep, they're a little too thin to fit that way, so we had to turn them on their side. As you enjoyed the first oiling so much, here's the second one. And every cutting board deserves its glamour shots. And this concludes the mystery end grade cutting board series. If you've watched every video, I appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, there's 2 other parts you can find on the channel. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing if you shared it. Thank you for commenting if you commented. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. If you liked what you saw, hit that bell so you're notified every time I upload new content, whether it's a new video or stories.